Welcome back. We're going to work on copper foil, a medium that's quite interesting to use, and if you've not used it before you can get yourself quite tied up in knots about it being difficult, and the reality of it is it's actually not difficult at all. So we're going to make a card with it so that you actually can have a play with it and you can understand what working with it really means and the effect that we're going to get from it. I'm going to start with my piece of blank copper foil. Now it comes generally in rolls. Sometimes you can buy it in sheets also, in a pack of 3 sheets, and you can get silver as well as the bronze, and you can also get a fairly bright gold as well. I particularly like to work with the bronze, so that's what we're going to work with today. And we're just going to cut a piece around about the size that we need for the stamp that we're going to work on. We're also going to work with the black StazOn pad because we do need an ink that is very permanent, because as you would be aware, when you're working on the copper it can easily slide, and you don't want your stamp to slide off the page and get a nice smudge look while you're working. So working with a black StazOn, because I want a really nice crisp outline, I've chosen the stamp that I want to use, and using the StazOn, I'm turning the stamp upside down and gently patting the StazOn pad across the top of it. The reason I'm doing it upside down is it actually helps me to look when I'm using a slightly larger stamp to ensure that I've got the coverage of ink that I really want to get there. So I'm happy with my coverage of ink, so turning my stamp over, as always holding your stamp securely so you don't drop it, it doesn't slip, it's not going to slide when you pop it down. I'm just going to center it where I want it, push it straight down without moving it, and then just press firmly to ensure that we've got the ink all over where we want it, holding the piece of foil and lifting up. And as you can see, we've got that inked up and it's turned out quite nicely. So I'm just going to give that a few minutes to dry. It does need to be able to dry properly, otherwise it will start smudging. The beauty of the StazOn is it does really dry quite quickly, so you're not going to lose a lot of time waiting for it to dry. So now that we've got that dry, I'm going to trim it first of all. Before I do anything else with it, I'm going to get my little tonic paper trimmer, and I'm going to line it up in here and try and get it, if I can, on a fairly straight line. I need to get it looking like it's fairly well cut where I want my outlines, so that most paper trimmers will actually cut through the foil relatively easily, and that makes it actually really nice because you're not trying to then use special cutters that need to be thick enough or hard enough to manage the foil. And obviously I'm wanting to keep my edges and my lines straight so that I get nice crisp lines on the edge of it. Just getting it ready to, and then we're going to work with it. Now what you will need with this particular, the way we're going to use this foil, is an embossing tool. Now generally these embossing tools are actually used to do dry embossing, and we're going to use it today to create a look on this foil of some of it being pressed out, so it will actually give it a bit of a 3D look. Now you need to also be able to find something to work on that gives you a little bit of soft cushion underneath. I'm just using some pieces of the foam core. Again, you can purchase this, and we often use this for punch outs and things like that, but I'm using this. I don't need a lot of cushioning, I just need something that will enable it to have a little bit of cushioning underneath. Place that underneath, and placing my image on top with my metal frame, I'm going to take my embossing tool. Now if you have a look at your embossing tools, you can get different shapes and sizes. This one, I have a large embossing tool, very large point on one end and a medium point on the other end, and on the second tool that I have here, sort of a semi-small and then a very small on the other end. I'm going to start working with the medium tool first. A really interesting thing to remember with this is that because you're rolling it over the foil, it will stick and it will scratch, and it feels like you're running your hands down a corkboard. I can't handle that. So it's really handy to have something waxy handy to just dip it into before you put it onto the foil, and that actually just helps it to run really smoothly across it. Now one of the tricks of the trade is that you don't actually have to have a cake of soap, you don't have to have a block of wax. All you need to be able to do is just rub it onto your scalp, because your natural oils from the scalp do actually give it the easy even movement that it needs to be able to run across. So just rubbing it onto your scalp and then just pressing right across And I'm just going over the lines, as you can see, and just pressing firmly. Now you don't have to go over every line on the stamp. That's entirely personal preference as to whether you go over every line, but just re-oil it on your scalp, or if you prefer to use a block of soap or a block of wax, you can do so, but it's just one more thing that you've actually got to find room for on your craft desk, and as we all know, that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. So I'm just rolling this across the lines just to give the desired effect, and you'll do this all the way across, and as I said, you know, if you don't want to do every line, it's not essential that you do every line. So I've just gone across the first one there. So we continue doing that until we've got all of them done, all the way up to the other end, and then we can start to work on the background above the beach houses, just to give a little bit of nice sky effect. So we'll put that one aside, and here we have the finished one that I've done a little bit earlier, and as you can see, I've done all 3 beach houses. I've then turned my piece of foil over and I'm working on the back side of it, and all I'm doing there is I've taken the fine embossing tool, the one with a very, very fine point, and I've literally done little swirls onto the back of the embossing. Now what it essentially looks like, using a pencil on a piece of paper, so you can see what I've done, the swirls that we're actually doing is just something like that. So if you can see very clearly, I've just gone around, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but I've just done a little swirl like that all the way across the top of the beach houses, and that's just given a really nice effective look on the top of the beach houses, and it's ready to go. So then all we have to do, setting our tools aside and putting aside the cushioning that we've been using, is taking the piece of cardstock, any colour that you're happy with. It tends to be quite nice working on a dark colour cardstock. So I've got my cardstock here, and I'm using a bronze copper cardstock as well, and I'm going to just have a look at how I really want to have this mounted. So effectively, I think probably what I'm wanting to do, I'm just going to put it on there. Often have a look at it, don't feel that you've just got to go straight into doing, but that, once that's on there, is actually going to look very, very classy, but very simple, which is probably the look that I want. I don't want so much detail that it takes away from what we're doing on the embossing. So I'm going to turn that over. I'm going to put double-sided tape around the edges, and on the areas that are embossed, that have been pushed out with the embossing tool, I'm going to put a little bit of silicone to give it a little bit of height on there. We'll use our double-sided tape, and we'll place some all. Now I'm going to put it all the way around the edges, using a little bit more than I would normally use, because I don't want the silicone to sneak out of the edges, but I also, because it's foil, it has a little bit more strength in it, so we need to put a little bit more tape to ensure that it actually does stick really well and doesn't come off. And you know, I think when you're doing your crafting, just you'll get into the habit of knowing how much tape you're comfortable using, and whether you actually think that you need to put more or less. Just always be aware that it's the end result that you want to be most concerned with, and therefore if there's any chance that it's going to come off, then you know that you're going to need to put a little bit more, because you really don't want someone to receive something that you've put a lot of effort into, and they take it out of the envelope, and all of a sudden the mounted picture falls off the card. It's not a good look. So I've just put the amount of tape that I'd like all the way around the edges. Before I peel that tape off, we're going to put just enough silicone just to give it a little bit of height, because we're not actually looking for a great deal of height. All we want to do is support the raised areas that we've already embossed. So we'll just pop that in there, and that silicone will fall down into the grooves as we press down on it and give it that support. So it'll be finished, and once we've done that, there we go, we have another 10-minute card. And now you can use any stamp on your copper foil. There's no correct stamp. I like the ones that have a little bit more openness to them, because it gives you a little bit more detail to actually be able to emboss around and create a really nice effect. So it is personal preference. Flowers, wide open flowers like daisies and things, come up looking absolutely beautiful as well. I just happen to have these beach houses, and it's one of the ones that I've used a great deal with this particular technique. So centering my little houses exactly where I want them on my card, just ensuring that I've got that looking fairly well centered. I'm going to press around the edges because that's where I've got their tape. So I'll press around those edges and then just press down gently, and what that actually does will adhere the siliconed area to the card. We fold that card in and there you have it. Absolutely beautiful, very, very quick and easy, looks spectacular. So enjoy.